Okay. Well, thank you very much for being with us today, Rainn, and for the presentation of the Struchen Award, which is a new award given by the Religion Communicators Council, in particular to recognize an individual, organization, or project that has served to elevate religious communication and consciousness beyond boundaries of faith. And when we were discussing as a board whether to whom we might want to present this award, your name quickly rose to the top, not only because you communicate faith matters beyond boundaries of faith, but also you do it beyond boundaries of any particular medium. The way that you've been able to, harness television and print literature and podcasts and to have everything kind of coalesce into one big whole and to make a name for yourself has been really, really impressive to us as faith communicators. And so if I may start out just with kind of a very broad question, why have you been involved in this space? Why have you been involved in this faith space over the years?
Well, that's a great question. Thank you so much for the award. Thank you for having me. Such a pleasure to speak with you. I love this conversation and happy to be a part of it. Um, yeah, the reason that I speak about faith with such passion and forthrightness is it's an integral part of my life. And I would not have integrity and integration if I didn't speak about it. And the matters of faith, of belief, kind of were forged for me in my 20s and early 30s when I was going through some really difficult times around mental health, around anxiety and depression and addiction. And I realized that my faith journey, my faith path was incredibly important to me figuring out some of these issues. And as I grew older and matured and kind of had a television and film career, I just realized that these questions of, why are we here and is there a God? And if there is a God, what does he, she, it, they want from us? How do we make choices in our lives? How can we become more united? That these central questions were just incredibly important to me, and I really feel like they're important to young people. And I felt like it was kind of a mission to engage in these kind of heady, meaty, but heart-based conversations.
Um, so talking about that, you feeling this sense of a mission to engage in these conversations, right? I can imagine that sometimes you would get pushback. People see you as Dwight Schrute from The Office. Why are you talking about this? Did you ever feel a risk of like alienating your fan base because you're talking about these questions of the soul?
I did feel a risk of alienating my fan base and alienating other people in Hollywood. And at the end of the day, I just decided it was more important than whatever alienation it caused. I just feel like these questions, these issues around faith, belief, finding a purpose and meaning are more important than, my day to day, week to week, month to month popularity, which waxes and wanes in Hollywood anyway. So, why the hell not? And so, yeah, but it definitely has put some people off. Like, wait a minute, the guy who plays the weird paper salesman beet farmer on that comedy is talking about God. Like, what is going on here? And part of it for me was realizing like my role as an actor and artist is really synonymous with my role as a spiritual being searching for truth, beauty, and meaning in life. It's an expression of who I am. It's seeking to do service. It's seeking to connect to something higher. So I think we live in a world where things can be very much in, separate little buckets and compartments. and I'm seeking to bring more kind of unity between those diverse elements.
Do you have any success stories of when this has all coalesced together really nicely? Um, you talk about the younger generation having these same questions. Have you been able to see the fruits of your labor, so to say?
Yes, the book that I wrote a couple years back called Soul Boom: Why We Need a Spiritual Revolution was really a testament to that. I didn't know how it was going to be received. And, for my generation, Gen X, younger generation, the millennials, um, God and religion are kind of a dirty word. There's kind of this big divide between the secular and the spiritual. But for this younger generation, they're kind of questioning everything. And they're much more open to ideas of spirituality than some of the older folks. And so we should not write off the folks that are between 15 and 30 and their interest in a spiritual path. And time again, I've heard from these younger folks how intrigued they are by the idea of, taking a spiritual path and a spiritual journey, the idea that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, and that perhaps it's spirituality that the world most needs right now.
So you have talking about that, you have talked about a spiritual vacuum in media. And so you're obviously doing your part to try to fill that spiritual vacuum with spirituality. But how do you think that we as faith-based communicators can push back on that vacuum? And what do you think is filling that vacuum that we need to push back on?
Yeah, so I think that for many decades, uh, stories of faith was kind of relegated to the side in Hollywood. And there's this kind of subsystem of like faith-based movies, many of which the quality is lower, many of which kind of have some corny sentimental values at their heart. Many are great, by the way, but they've kind of been relegated to the side. And there's been a lot of judgment, I think, in Hollywood. But I think that people's minds and hearts are opening, even in jaded, materialistic Hollywood, to the idea that this is part of the human experience. It's part of the American experience. Spiritual life, church life is very much what it is to be an American. And at the end of the day, we just need great content that shows that faith doesn't need to be corny, that it doesn't need to be superstitious, that it can be woven into family life and into career life, and create characters and storylines that put that front and center.
Yeah. So from what I'm hearing, because we always, I mean, from a lay perspective, we feel like there is tension between Hollywood culture and spiritual commitment, but you think that's getting erased, that we're on the right trajectory, if you will.
I think we are, but I think it's really important that people make their voices heard to studios, to producers, when they see storylines and characters that they like, and when they see storylines and characters that they don't. There was kind of an infamous incident that happened with the TV show The Last of Us, where there was an evil character giving a sermon, and it was kind of this cult-like situation, and he ended up being like a cannibal preacher or something like that. And I posted about this and said, I think this is really offensive and too bad. Like, why can we not show pastors that are just normal people, not cannibals, but actually people with normal struggles and families, and they're not cornball. It's not a G-rated Disney movie. but they don't. Time and time again, we've gone to that well of like the person of faith is kind of the an evil presence, and it caused a great conversation. There were a lot of news articles about it. There was a lot of back and forth about it, and I think that we just need to make our voices heard, so that Hollywood knows that matters of faith are central to your average American experience.
As a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints myself, I know about there's one way that it's portrayed in the media, and it's nice to have a little nuance sometimes.
Yes.
But I will turn the floor over to Shirley, who has some more questions for you.
And Rainn, personal privilege here. I wish my husband was here. He would get such a hoot out of this because he was a United Methodist minister, but he found that magic and doing patter, which he thought was comedy prone, but some people questioned. He found that brought people together as he went out, because he traveled a lot. He was in the mission board. And that brings me to you. You mentioned in your 20s going through some challenges, and I wondered, did comedy come into your being in that time period? How did comedy become part of who you are?
Well, it's funny that you should say that. The great thinker and teacher and author Arthur Brooks writes a lot about kind of the source of comedy. That comedy often comes from people that have gone through really difficult times, because when I was an adolescent and a child and very unhappy, you can't feel two things at the exact same time, and you can't feel kind of joy and humor and pain at the same time. So many young folk that go into comedy and stand up and create characters, we see that they have issues with depression or addiction or whatever, because comedy has been used to kind of counteract what's painful and negative in their lives. So it's kind of a coping mechanism that works on a chemical and biological level. So that's part of it. And also, quite frankly, I, had a lot of struggles and low self-esteem. And I found that if I made people laugh, and I could make people laugh, that I got attention, and it was a way into kind of living a more fruitful social life. And I decided to, make a career of it.
Have you seen it hard, difficult, or easy to bring faith-based, language into your comedy? I just wondered how your audiences react to you.
Well, truth be told, I'm not really a stand-up comic. I'm much more of an actor, and I play kind of funny characters. And I haven't had too many opportunities to play characters that have strong faith in them. But one of the things I try and do on the Soul Boom podcast is have deep, meaningful conversations about very real, metaphysical and mental health issues, and bring a kind of levity and absurdity to it, so that it's not taken quite so seriously. Because oftentimes matters of faith and spirituality are treated with such kind of like self-seriousness and sanctity that they're a little boring. So how can we spice up those conversations and make them entertaining and funny and relatable?
That's terrific. I know this summer, I'm from Western New York, so I know Chautauqua Institute, and I know you're going to be on the amphitheater stage in July. I'm not going to ask you what you're going to say, but that audience is one that has had a Lewis Black, for instance, who's comedian, but also they had asked him to talk about things of the world. So I'm thrilled, one, that you're going to be there, but you're also in the home area of the National Comedy Museum in Jamestown. I hope you're going to get the opportunity to go there and see it because it is, you know,
I've heard it's a wonderful museum. I've heard from several people that it's like surprisingly well done.
it is. We were living there for a while when it first opened, but I think um, you being on the stage at Chautauqua, which brings a lot of things together. It's art, it's music, it's comedy, and so on. I'm intrigued that one, you'll be there, and certainly you'll be great. I don't want to ask you what you're going to talk about, but how do you go out into these large venues with the comedy, the acting, and pull it all together? I assume that, I know it's a theme week, I don't remember the theme, but how do you pull it together to make your 30-minute speech before you get the Q&A?
Well, um, listen, it comes from two main reservoirs. One is my own personal journey, which I certainly uh, share about. I think that a lot of people have also had journeys involving anxiety, depression, addiction, difficulty, struggle, and resilience, and how faith connects to that. But I also believe that um, we need greater unity between the faiths. We need this idea that there can be some spiritual solutions to the chaos and disunity and rancor that is existing in contemporary American culture. And it's crucial that we be having these conversations. So it's really something bigger than me. I just think we need to be having these conversations. Humanity needs it. We're on the brink of dozens of wars and incredible amounts of division and rancor, and it's a necessary balm.
Thank you. That's terrific. And I'm so excited that you're the first person to get the Struchen Award. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Abraham.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. And thank you, Ren. Speaking of the Soul Boom, you've already published 80 episodes, not to mention the book and the interactive practical tool that was introduced. In your conversations, in those intimate conversations, what are some of the things that have been most surprising to you as the host? Which assumptions of you have been challenged and caused you to rethink?
Yeah, I thank you very much for that thoughtful question. I guess for me, something that I've always believed in is the link between spirituality and and mental health. And we're going through this mental health crisis that is absolutely devastating, especially for the younger generation. And more, this generation is turning to spiritual ideas to give them an anchor in the world, purpose, and meaning, and a perspective. And that has been very surprising to me. How much I've had comedians, musicians, actors talking about how important their spiritual journey has been to their mental health and the links between the two. So it's not, spirituality, and I'm putting spirituality aside a little bit from faith and religion. We have, Muslim and, you know, LDS and Baha'i and many different faiths in your organization. But this idea that we are spiritual beings, that there's something more than the mere material, that our journey starts, in these bodies, but continues on in some kind of, infinite measure. These ideas are so central to grounding oneself in purpose and meaning, and purpose and meaning are, central to the mental health struggle. So hearing from all of these disparate voices about their the importance of finding a spiritual center has been really revelatory.
And you mentioned the beginnings of your journey, very personal, in search for meaning and having your own personal story. And the soul boom is a wider opening for a social cultural shift. So it's beyond personal. So that's a whole different experience. And then how does it land back to your personal after having had these conversations? How has engaging these conversations publicly strengthened or affected your own journey with your own faith?
Well, theoretically, you cultivate your own kind of spiritual garden. You cultivate the qualities of the divine, of kindness and compassion and humility. And then the reason we do that is not just to feel better or reduce anxiety, but so that we can bring that into the world and that we can be of service to others and we can, reduce the suffering of others. And I feel like in doing that and being of service in that way, it only strengthens and cultivates your own personal spiritual journey. And it's kind of a yin and yang, and these two, the internal and the external kind of feed off each other. You can't do one without the other. You can't just give and be of service and not, work on tend to your own kind of faith and spiritual garden. But you can't just tend to your garden and leave it at that. You have to also then bring it to the world in some way. So it's an ongoing dance. And when America is working at its best, it is in a harmony between people tending to themselves, taking care of themselves, nurturing, that divine spark in themselves, and then also bringing it to the world.
Yeah, I love that ongoing dance metaphor. It quite captures that story. And to bring it a bit closer to the heart of the RCC convention and the collegial network that it brings together in this current moment, in this current world that seems to be increasingly secularized, how can we as religion communicators stay motivated and stay productive?
Well, I think that people need love and people need compassion. And wherever we can harness the tools of our specific faith to do that and to bring people together. And, I love seeing even on the Zoom, people of different faiths, coming together. That's what it's all about. Maybe it sounds a little hippy dippy, maybe it sounds, a little vague. But this is what people need is they need deep love and healing and compassion. And who better to bring that than than the Muslim community, than the Christian community, than the Jewish community, than the Buddhist community that have a deep understanding and study of these necessary virtues.
Thank you, Rainn. So I'll pass it back to Rainn now.
So we just have a couple more questions because nobody has the patience to watch a Zoom for longer than about 30 minutes these days. But you were talking about, who better than the Christians, the Muslims, the Jews, etc., to bring these principles of deep love. I'm curious, what are some of part of what we do in the Religion Communicators Council is religious literacy. So what are some of the tenets, specifically of your Baha'i faith, that have informed your work and have informed your advocacy?
Well, so the Baha'i faith, as most of you probably know, acknowledges the central divinity and wisdom of all the world's religions. And one of the things we were just talking about is a key idea of the Baha'i faith that I kind of lifted and put in Soul Boom, which was that there is a twofold moral path that we walk. And on one hand, we're enriching ourselves in our own divine qualities and attributes, and the other hand, we're being of service in the world. And uh, Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, talks again and again about let let all men, you know, um, move forward in ever advancing civilization. And part of our spiritual charge is to take these, God-centered ideas and put them in the world to make the world a better place. It's not enough to, you know, sit in a corner and meditate and pray and um, feed, the flame of your own spiritual path, but we really do need to bring it into the world. So that's part of the Baha'i faith that I find very inspiring. Is Baha'is everywhere are focused on social transformation and service at the grassroots, and I love being a part of a community that puts that front and center.
If I can get a little personal, you talked about the struggles a lot of people have and not being able to have joy and sadness at the same time, right? And I'm sure you've heard this a million times, but I was going through a pretty dark period of my life, say 2019, 2020, leading into the pandemic, and The Office is one of the things that got me through. And so I really needed that joy, that laughter, that idiocy sometimes in order to, to get it through the day sometimes. And so I really, really appreciate that. Since that time, I've listened to pretty much the entire Office Ladies podcast. And I remember one particular episode where Jenna and Angela were talking about you. And they were saying something to the effect of, if you ever had a question for the soul, you would always go to Rainn. Like it was just always very much when you were thinking the deep thoughts, go to Rainn. Rainn is perfect. He talks about those things. He thinks about those things. And so, and the whole time I was thinking, say that he's Baha'i, say that he's Baha'i, and they never did. And so I was literally yelling at the podcast. But for my final question, just how do you strike that balance in a professional setting to be forthright about your faith, but not come across as overly evangelical about your faith? How do you engage in those conversations with coworkers? How do you look for those opportunities?
Yeah, great question. I feel like I share things that are important to me. I'm a fan of the Seattle Seahawks, and I am proud to say I love the Seahawks. I'm happy for them. Go Hawks. They won the Super Bowl. And I'm a member of the Baha'i faith. I'm proud to say I'm a Baha'i. Here's what I believe. This is why I think Baha'i is awesome. Um, but I'm not trying to convert anybody. I'm just sharing my reality. And I think that's where people kind of get stuck is to fearlessly share who they are, what they love, what brings them joy, what brings them connection. Um, we can do it with sports. Why do we struggle to do it with faith?
And that is a very, very good point to make. Well, Rainn, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your day to speak with us today, for accepting the Struchen Award, for being such a great spokesperson on behalf of faith in general, on behalf of the Baha'i faith, and for everything that you do to promote goodness in society. It's really, really commendable. I also, before we close out the recording, I also want to particularly thank Lisa Arondarski, your assistant, who's been invaluable in helping to coordinate all of this today.
Oh, great. That's great to hear. And here's my award. It's a lovely award. Hopefully, I won't drop it. I'm so honored. Thank you, Shirley. Thank you, everyone. I will keep it very proudly. And thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you so much, Rainn.
Thanks.
Thank you, Rainn.